I'm David Stone. I am a potter and a teacher at Still Life Ceramic Studios, and today I wanted to do a little demonstration on using a slump mold. Okay, a slump mold is basically literally any form that you would drape a slab of clay that you've rolled out flat over. Very often, most often they're actually made out of plaster, but they can be made out of anything. They can be made out of wood. They could be made out of styrofoam. You could carve a form. You could even just get a bunch of newspaper and crumple it up into some sort of a free-form, shape, and use that to drape the clay over, and that would actually be considered a slump mold. It's often used to just make basic simple forms, like a bowl or a very shallow plate. It's a convenient and rather quick way of forming. I'm going to do two demonstrations. I'm going to demonstrate using a slump mold as if you were just working on a table, just sort of a hand building technique. I'm also going to demonstrate using a hump mold on the wheel, and basically I'm going to utilize the wheel that will allow me to throw a foot ring onto the form that I've shaped with the hump mold, which is sort of a clever way of getting a piece that is shallow maybe, or just you want to have an exaggerated foot, and you're not going to have to do any trimming on it because you're actually just the foot is what you're actually throwing. So give me a little bit to get set up, and I'm going to get ready and we'll do our demo. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is to roll out a slab. That's what I've done here, and at the studio we would normally use a slab roller. I don't have one here. I don't even have a rolling pin, so I just found an old piece of cardboard tubing that I rolled this out on my garage floor. So it's not as sort of perfectly flat or even as would be absolutely desirable. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to move pan over here a little bit, and then I'm just going to demonstrate just slumping the clay over the mold as if I was working on a table, not on a wheel. So let me just get started with that. Okay, so I've cut my slab in half, and I'm not sure this is going to fit entirely over the mold, but I'm just going to, just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to show you basically how this works. Now, one of the things that you're going to realize pretty quickly is, as I start to do this, you can see that, and it's not that big a deal on this small of a piece of clay, plus this clay is very wet, but a lot of times when you're going from a flat surface to a curved surface, if I was just to go like this, you can see that there's excess clay, right, in terms of the actual diameter that we're working with, right? So the diameter of the clay is going to have to be compressed in, which is And it's a good thing this is really soft clay, because it does that pretty easily. If this was more extreme, you would see it would almost look like it was starting to fold in on itself, and then you're just really going to have to ease that over, okay, and try and get those clay particles to kind of jiggle themselves back, you know, into where you want them to go. Okay, so, you know, in terms of the slump mold, that's kind of it right there, right? You see how the clay has now taken on the form of the mold itself. And if we were to let this harden up a little bit, and then like just pop it off, and I'm not really, you know, just because this is for demonstration purposes, right? You can see that it's now formed like this sort of little dish, right? If you wanted to make a perfect bowl, of course, you would like cut it in a perfect circle, and we can do something like that on this piece. It'll be much smaller because I just didn't have enough clay to cover the whole thing. But if I were to, let's just like take this, and when you're working with a plaster mold, one thing you never want to do is cut it. Let me do this so you can hear me. Sorry. You never want to cut a plaster mold, cut your clay on a plaster mold with anything metal. You don't want to use a metal knife, you don't want to use a metal needle tool, anything metal, because whatever scratches you put into the face of this piece, and you can see somebody has done that at some point, whatever scratches you put into that piece is going to stay forever in that piece, and then any piece you put on that mold is going to show that scratch on the inside. It's just going to be something you're going to have to deal with. Okay, so we've got this now on our mold, and now if you wanted to kind of just make a round dish, you would just turn your mold, trying to keep your knife as level as possible, right, as you come all the way around, and then you're going to peel away the excess clay, right, and then you're kind of left with this. This will be like just a little flat disc, but with a little bit of curvature to it from the mold itself, right? So, and I'm just rushing all of this because I want to get on to the next demonstration, but normally you would just leave this to set up until it's a little bit like at least leather hard, and then you would pop it off, right? And you can see that little curve, and then you can clean up that edge if you feel like it with a sponge or a chamois or something like that. You could also leave it rough like that, which, you know, a lot of people like to do. But you could, if you wanted to, you could put a little foot ring on this piece. You know, you could just take some of this excess clay and roll it out into a rope. Let's move this up so we can you know, these are all sort of hand building techniques, which is not, I mean, I do it, it's just not my, it's not that I prefer to work on the wheel. Well, yes, I prefer to work on the wheel, obviously. So you roll out a rope like that, right? You would probably do a better job, right? And then, you know, you can just kind of define a little foot like that, which is something I'm going to do later on in a little more defined way. And normally what you would do in this case is, obviously, you would do a little scoring, you know, a little score and slip, and then either just, if you wanted this to be rustic and looked like it was just stuck on like that, you'd be done with it. If you wanted to look like it was, you know, part of the piece, then you would come around and just kind of work it into the body of the so that it, you know, it kind of feels like it's organically growing out of there. Or you could also do, if you wanted to just show the attachment, like a lot of times I like to do that too. I'll just leave it just like that, so you see, you know, those attachment marks. So there's lots of different ways of approaching this. Okay, so that is sort of a slump mold, not on a wheel. Okay, we were just saying this isn't a wheel, this is just a flat table surface. Or maybe, you know, like one of the Lazy Susans that we have at the studio, or if you have one at home, you can use that to turn your piece, makes it a little easier to work with. Okay, so that's that. Now, if you are going to work with your slump mold on the wheel and actually use it as something to throw on, you're going to need to attach your plaster bat to the wheel. Now, most of the times that you guys are working, you're working with, you're already working on a bat. You've got, you know, normally there would be bat pins in here, and you would place your bat down on here, and so, and then you would need to attach your slump mold to that bat. The way you would do that is you would put a very sort of a thin layer of clay, just smear it out as thin as you possibly could, put some ridges in it, and stick it down on there, and it would stick pretty well. One of the things that you can, but you can with a metal wheel like this, if it's not plastic, and a plaster bat, you can just take a little bit of slip, and this is kind of wild, but you can just take a little bit of slip on here. But this only works, it only works with metal for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. And if you just plop it down on there and give it a second, what happens is, and you want to make sure that it's as centered as possible, but you can see how stuck that is, right? Whoops, that's my bounce light. What happens is that the plaster, the slip sticks to the metal surface, and then the plaster sucks the water out of the slip, and it just glues it to the wheel head. Okay, but you can only do that if you're working on the metal bat head. Okay, so now I've got my bat kind of stuck on here, and then the next process is really the same, right? We're just going to slump our clay over our work here, and now you can see like a little bit how those, it's kind of like buckling up a little bit. All right, so just get that on there as well as you can. Okay. Now, if I could leave this like with these little wings and just be totally free-formed with this, which I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try. I actually like that little free-form thing I got going on there, so I'm going to try and just sort of duplicate that in kind of a cheating kind of way, right? So I'm just going to just sort of Tom Coleman it. If you know who he is, but you should look up his work. He's an amazing potter. And if you use porcelain, you're probably using his porcelain. Okay, so just kind of, he just does all these great little organic edges on his teacups, which I'm very enamored of. All right. Okay, so I've got my form, right, and it's, so now Now I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I need to make a little rope of clay, right? So I'll do that just real quickly, roll it out. You could also, if you had, and at the studio we have an extruder, which makes making these ropes very simple and easy. You just extrude out a round form. Okay, so there's my foot ring now. I'm just going to pinch that off, and I'm just going to pinch that off there. Okay, and this clay is so wet and so soft. I'm not even going to bother to score and slip it. You should, even with the clay, but this is just for demonstration purposes. It's probably better to do that. So I'm just gonna skip that, because again, I like to keep these demos in under 20 minutes, just to keep you guys from getting too bored. Okay, so I probably should have drawn the circle so I know exactly what I was doing in terms of a circle. I didn't, so this is going to be a little trickier. Okay. Alright, so I've got that on there. So now I'm just going to get my wheel going a little bit. Yeah, you can see how off center that is, but we're still going to make do with it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to center that up on there. Alright, there you go. Okay, you guys probably noticed that I throw a slip. So I do that because I don't like to use too much water. I find it's a little, the clay lasts a little bit longer, works a little bit better for me. It's a tiny bit problematic just because you have to have the slip, and the slip that you use needs to be the same clay that you're throwing on. So if you're throwing it with, with porcelain, you have to have porcelain slip. If you're throwing with B-mix, you should have B-mix slip. It's, definitely white clays need white slip and darker clays need darker slips. Okay, so we've got that. Now I just want to maybe I'll just grab a rib and smooth that out a little bit. Smooth out that transition a little bit. Okay, so it's really as simple as that, right? Now I've got this bowl form with a foot, right? And I'm just gonna define this foot just a little bit more. I'm just gonna put a little line right here. Boom. Foot, right? So everybody can see that that was intentional or whatever. All right, so that's a slump mold, in an instant. Just a very, very, very quick, demo on how to use them. Like I said, you can be as creative as you want. Anything can be a slump mold, and it also does not necessarily have to be sort of a convex surface too. A slump mold can be a concave surface. So if you find like a great wooden bowl or a bowl with, like a woven bowl with a really cool texture that you want on the outside, you can slump your clay into that and sort of press it into that texture, and then as it dries, it'll pull away from it and it'll impart that texture onto the outside of it. All right. So there you have it. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that demonstration. That was a very sort of quick and down and dirty slump mold demonstration. Take it as far as you want to do it. Be creative. Remember to love the process, not the piece. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others.